Hello, OKCMAR members. It's good to see your virtual faces. This is your immediate past president, Becky Karp, coming at you live from my library. Hi, Becky, the other Becky. Oh, it's good to see all these faces pop up. I love it. Well, luckily for me, JT, our esteemed president, had some scheduling conflicts today, so he asked me if I would be willing to MC our virtual luncheon today. And you guys know me, I will never pass up an opportunity to get a microphone in my hand. So I'm here with you today, and we've got a great speaker lined up. I'm really excited about that. It's going to come a little bit later in our program today. But I've kind of been studying up on the art of negotiation, and what Meg is going to say to us today hits home with me, and it should with all of you pretty deeply, because as realtors, we often forget that if we don't take care of ourselves, we are not able to take care of anybody else. So I'm looking forward to our presentation today, as I know the rest of you are. I'm gonna let a couple more people join on. My notes that I received from the staff says that I am to conduct a moment of silence for COVID. And I think that that's super important, but COVID might not be exactly what it is that's heavy on your mind today. Maybe you've got another concern or worry, and you'd like to take a few deep breaths and talk to God about it. Meditate on it, or if you want to just set it down for the next hour, you can do that. So I'm going to start this moment of silence with a gong, and I'm going to end the moment of silence with a gong. And during those two gongs, you feel free to do whatever you want to do. Clear your mind. Welcome back. Take another deep breath, because you can't keep moving if you don't have those breaths in your lungs. So first on our program today is Cheryl Pickens, OKCMAR board member and the chair of our OKCMAR leadership program. I'm super passionate about leadership development, if you don't already know, and I am so excited about the direction that Cheryl has taken our program this year. I know that the class is a great class. I got to meet with them once. And Cheryl, are you here with us today? I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yes, ma'am. I'm getting all my papers in front of me because I have a few words for you. I'm going to get to where my background is more pleasing, and I'll turn on my video so I can see you lovelies, or you can see me, I guess. Very good. I am coming live to you from my house here in Oklahoma City. A year ago, when we started talking about the Leadership Academy offered by OKCMAR, I wanted to expand from the wonderful 10-year tradition that had already been in place with LT7. I just had a little bit of a different path I wanted to take, and fortunately our president JT Brown was very generous and letting me kind of chart this path. And so I have had such a good time putting my fingerprint on it. And the whole idea was to identify OKCMAR members who wish to accelerate their success in personal excellence, office influence, community engagement, and industry professionalism. And I believe we all agree that the better an agent is all around, the better that agent is to work with, the better he serves his clients. So that was kind of my broad approach. And so we scheduled I think, a dozen classes that we were excited to present. And then, of course, COVID hit us in the face, and we've done most of them virtually, but we've had a few opportunities to have some in person and virtual. So one of the aspects that I wanted to continue from the LT7 model was a class project, something that this group of people can leave behind and say, we did that. And again, without being able to get in public spaces, we were very, very limited. But one of our class members, Becky Ivins, brought to the group the attention of the Oklahoma Foundation for the Disabled. And we looked into what they do and how we could help. And so we all made donations, and we'll be sponsoring 2 of OKFD's live parties, events that they have at their facility once they're able to open their doors like that again. So our class is going to be able to sponsor 2 of those parties and be present with those individuals and shake their hands and hug their necks one day. And so I'm very proud of our class for not giving up on the fact that, you know, we wanted to do something, and even with our limits, we were still able to pull it off. We had 21 people sign up. That was very surprising to me, and I'll tell you, JT, as well. We didn't know what we would get by expanding this. So we had 21 folks, and I want to just read their names and the agencies they're with. And when we're all done, hold your applause till the end. And when we're done, we will give a big shout out for their accomplishments. Ashley Young, Metro First Realty Unlimited. Patricia Wilton, Metro First Realty LLC. Patty Wilson, Keller Williams, Green Meadow. Jeremy Willis, EXP Realty. Cherie Whitna, Trinity Team Real Estate. Rachel Whitna, Trinity Team Real Estate. Martha Vasquez Pirtle, Whittington Realty. Peter Pembroke, Lime Realty. Michelle Patra, Keller Williams Yukon. Judy Olson, Movers Real Estate Company. LaRonda McCarter, Century 21, Mosley Real Estate. Blake Cowman, Movers Real Estate Company. Nancy Lynn, Chamberlain Realty, LLC. Becky Ivins, Movers Real Estate Company. Sherry Houston, Metro First Realty Unlimited. Jennifer Howard, Keller Williams, Central OK Edmond. Jeff Haraney, Hoco Real Estate, Inc. Juan Frausto, Remax Preferred Properties. Crystal Kalk, Lux Sales Management. Robin Buchanan, Peak Realty. And Cara Bose, KBB Real Estate. I am so stinking proud of these guys for hanging in there. It would have been very easy to say, you know, Cheryl, you're not delivering everything you promised, so I'm out. But because these are stellar individuals and they believed in our mission, they knocked it out of the park. So we hope that with this success of this year that we can put out an invitation in a couple of months to start for 2021, and that'll be under the direction of Stephen Ligon, our incoming president. So we'll get all those details out to you soon. But thank you guys so much for allowing this program to happen within OKCMAR. I appreciate it. Now you can applaud.
Thank you, Cheryl. And congratulations to the OKCMAR Leadership Academy class of 2020. Next up on our agenda is our great speaker. Dr. Meg Myers-Morgan is an award-winning author, college professor, keynote speaker, and a certified executive coach. She has written several books. Her latest book, Everything is Negotiable, is a bestseller, and her TED Talk can be found on YouTube or any place you get your TED Talks. I highly recommend that you check out her TED Talk. But before you get to the TED Talk, you're gonna get the real thing. So with a warm OKCMAR welcome, let's invite Meg Myers-Morgan onto the screen to start a presentation. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks for the shout out for the TED Talk. It was a while ago. It was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago now. So yeah, please go check that out. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. Let me share my screen. There's just my website in case you ever want to get a hold of me or need to get a hold of me for any reason. Before I begin my talk, which is going to be someone on negotiation, and the team that just graduated, congrats to you. Part of their programming used my book. I highly recommend it. So if you wanted to purchase it or want to listen to me read it, you can get the audio version as well. So as we dive in here, I just want to give you a little background on where I'm coming from, because I realize I'm talking to realtors who must be some of the people most steeped in negotiation more than anyone else. And I know, like, one of the toughest negotiations that I went through was in the house that I'm currently sitting in. So I was reflecting on that before getting on this call today, of like how intense that negotiation was. So I'm definitely preaching to the choir. So I just want to give you a little background on where I'm coming from when I talk about negotiation. I really didn't set out to become an expert on negotiation. But what happened was I gave birth about nine years ago to this kid. This is an older picture, but I love this picture because she looks so sweet and innocent, and like you would just give her anything in the world. But very quickly, even before she could talk, I realized she was a shrewd negotiator, and she does all the things right that we see kids do. She doesn't care what you think. She's relentless. She gets what she wants. She never backs down. And so I just kind of watched that and was like, wow, how is she able to do this? And I'm not able to do this. I'm a professor at the University of Oklahoma, and my graduate students aren't able to negotiate like this. And so my takeaway was, okay, some people are just born with it. My daughter, Lowry, is just born that way. And you're either born with it or you're not. And then what happened was I had a second daughter, and she was very passive and pleasing and a little bit more shy. And what I watched, though, was that my first was able to train the second. So I was watching what I thought was just something that you were born with. And I think we have a lot of traits that we think people are born with, like confidence, or integrity, or negotiation, but it's not. It's a skill that can be taught. And so I watched these two girls, one that I think inherently knows how to negotiate, teach another one how to negotiate, and it set a framework up for what my life and career has been. And I was able to turn that into a TED Talk. I was able to turn that into a book. And so it's just now become this thing that I speak about frequently, and most often to women, but really to audiences around, just about what it means to have negotiation as a framework for how we live our life and how we do our career. So what I want to talk about is again, negotiating on setting better terms in work and life. And so I will have some tips in here about like negotiating money, but it's so much broader than that. So please understand, as I go through this talk, this can be a negotiation for anything in your life. It might be wanting more help at home. It might be negotiating your salary. It might be wanting a better career. It might be whatever it might be. Negotiation is a framework and a skill that can help you get there. The takeaways that I want to make sure you get today. One, I want to tell you the 3 reasons why women, but also just men in general, just everyone in general. My research happens to be more around women. So I'm going to tell you the 3 reasons why women don't negotiate. I'm going to tell you the 3 components of a successful negotiation. And I'm going to tell you 3 areas to employ this in your life. So those are what I hope you take away from today. And again, if you ever want to continue this conversation or ask me more, please reach out to me. But at the end of this talk, I'll reserve time for Q&A as well. Before we get to this, though, let's make sure that we're operating on the same definition. My publisher did not want me to use the word negotiation in the title of my book because they thought it was very off-putting. And when people hear that word, they have very negative connotations. It must be a fight. It must be a conflict. So I want to be really clear here. Negotiation isn't manipulating someone for more than you deserve. It's leveraging your worth for something that you value. And that sometimes may be money, and that sometimes may be self-respect, and that sometimes may be help. Whatever it is, what you need to have in mind at all times is what you are worth and what you value. And those are difficult things, I think, for people to always articulate or always know, but it's the most important work to do, because then every negotiation can be successful. But again, I want to be clear. This isn't a fight. This isn't a conflict. I want to kind of retake the word, and it was wanted it to be in the book title because I think negotiation can actually be a profound thing that benefits everyone. Okay, 3 reasons why women and or men, but specifically, again, the research here is around women, why they don't negotiate. And as I go through these, they're going to feel really simple and maybe even laughable, but I've seen it play out over and over and over. So the first reason why people don't negotiate is they didn't know you could. Simple enough, I wasn't aware this was a situation where I could negotiate. 2, they aren't clear on what they're asking for. And 3, they're worried what other people will think. Now, in the abstract, this is what it looks like, but I'll give you an example in the concrete. I had a student about a couple of weeks ago, a graduate student who came to me with a job offer. And she said, here's the job offer, here's the salary, but I don't know if this is a situation where I can negotiate. And even if it is a situation where I can, I don't even know what I'd ask for. I don't even know what an appropriate counteroffer is. And even if I did that, even if I knew I could negotiate and knew what I wanted to ask, I'm worried they're going to think I'm greedy, or I'm worried they're going to think that I'm ungrateful for the job offer. And I have seen that play out, whether it's about money, or it's about telling a spouse you need more help at home, or it's about asking for better terms at work around your work-life balance. This is a little bit of the thought process that we take ourselves through. We didn't know we could, we aren't clear on the ask, and we're worried what other people will think. So how do we spot when you can, right? How can we identify when we can negotiate? And I'll give you a hint. The name of my book is Everything is Negotiable. So my assumption is you always can, but let's figure out how you can. The first would be identifying the pain point. A couple of months, actually not a couple of months ago now, it was before the pandemic. I picked my kids up at school. It was raining. My husband was traveling. I came back with the kids. They were hungry. It was chaos in the house. The dogs needed to be fed. The laundry was everywhere. I mean, just everything. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to get a whole new husband, a whole new house. I'm going to birth different kids because I cannot do this. This is too much. When we get stressed or when we get upset, we go big. I need a whole new job. I need a whole new career. I need a whole new everything. Luckily, I kept the husband and the kids. We've moved forward and I'm good now. But what happens when I see people come to me either about their career or about coming back to graduate school, that's the big things that they talk about. And so they need a whole new job. So I had a prospective student recently that came to me and said, I just need a whole new job, a whole new career. And when we got to really talking about, well, what's going on? She said, I just don't feel very challenged anymore. And I'm like, well, then that's your pain point then is boredom. Let's negotiate around boredom. Let's first figure out what's really driving your angst here, because we jump to that solution before we've really identified the problem. And so when we can get really clear about what the pain point is, it's often a much smaller negotiation. She was able to go back and take on a different project at work that kept her energized, and it kept her from having to find an entirely new career. So whatever situation you're in right now, whatever angst or anxiety or frustration you're feeling, it's just a first offer. And I want you to feel empowered to counter. I want you to feel like you have the authority and the power to go back and say, I need to reset these terms, even if you didn't do it in the beginning. The second way to identify when you can negotiate is to get a good mentor. My first job out of college, I was 22. I took the job offer. It was more money than I'd ever seen. Looking back, it was not money. It was not good money. And I'd been on the job and took it for about 3 months. And then they hired in Paul. And Paul had the same degree and took the same position parallel to mine. And after he'd been at the job, the CEO brought me down to her office and she said, I just wanted you to know that we hired in Paul at $5,000 a year more than we hired in you at. And she said, it's not because we offered him more, it's because he asked for more. And she said, so what I'm going to do in this moment is I'm going to raise your salary to match his so long as you never let this happen again. And that was a woman that at the time was in her late 60s and I was in my early 20s. And she not only got me points on the board, but she taught me how to play the game. I would have never known that that was even something I could have done. And that was my response to her, right? Back to those 3 reasons we don't negotiate. I didn't know that was an option. Nobody told me that was an option. So the reason that it's important to find good mentors is they have more eyes on the play and they can tell you kind of what's going on long-term, things you may not see. But I will tell you, the research shows that when it comes to mentorship, it's only successful. It is only successful if you are consistent and clear about what you need from it. I mentor dozens of students, dozens of women, and those who say, this is what I need from our relationship, and here's how consistently I want to meet with you, those are the ones that are the most successful. If your mentor doesn't know they're your mentor, that's not success. There has to be a clear framework there so that your mentor is aware of what you need from him or her. The second reason that we don't negotiate is we aren't clear on the ask. Again, we go big, we go wide. I've got all these balls in the air. I'm so stressed out. There's nothing I can do. I just have to start all over. But it's really impossible to dismiss clarity. If somebody comes to you and they say, I'm so stressed out, you feel a little bit stressed yourself on how to help them. If they come to you and say, this is the thing that I need from you, that's really, really easy, right? So we want to get a little bit more clear on what we're asking. So the first I'd say is, do not confuse your wants. It's an entire chapter of my book. It's the thing that we do the most. I'm guilty of it more than anyone. So I'm giving the talk that I myself need. I had a client call me from New York City and wanted to negotiate her salary. And I said, great, what is driving this? Why now? And she said, because I sit next door to a guy named Joe, and I learned that Joe makes twice what I do, and Joe's an idiot. And I said, well, that's great. Joe may in fact be an idiot, but that man figured out how to negotiate his salary. And you cannot go into that room and say, I want it because he has it. It doesn't work with my children, and it's not going to work with you. And so we had to sit there and think about, what is it that you bring? What is the value you have? What about your job and the way you do your job is more compelling? So when she called a couple of weeks later, she was so excited that she was successful, but she was more excited because she said, I went in proud of myself and not resentful of my coworker. And she and Joe have actually managed to have a pretty good relationship now because she's not sitting there comparing herself. We cannot negotiate on anything for ourselves using someone else's terms, but we do it all the time. And I do it most often with other mothers. And if you listen to my TED Talk, that's one of the big things I've had to overcome was not mothering for other women, not mothering the way other parents do. That's a hard one fight. But you can't confuse your wants if you want to know what you need. The next thing I'll say is to ask yourself the right questions. You know, as a coach and as a teacher, it's never about advice. It's always about asking the right questions. And people ask themselves terrible questions. And so a common question that people ask themselves are, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. That is by far the most idiotic question we can ask ourselves, because you can't answer that and you shouldn't answer that. And the pressure that you would feel trying to answer that is overwhelming. A better question might be, what excites me right now, right? What am I interested in right now? What might I want to do next? What are the current clues? What's available to me? Again, we tend to go really wide. We try to solve big problems. But if you cannot answer, if you are struggling to find the answer, then you need to change the question. If you're sitting there saying, I don't really know what to do, or I'm stuck, my guess is you're asking the wrong question. Because again, when you delve into that problem, the answer becomes really clear. The final thing, and this is not small, that people worry about when they're negotiating is they're worried what people will think. And we're worried about this on multiple levels, right? And so this really comes to play when we think about negotiation. The first thing I'll say is you need to identify the identity crisis, right? That your identity is being touched somewhere, somehow by other people. And you're making a decision based on what other people might think, or they do think, or they've told you they think. So I had a client in California. She was in the tech world, which I'm not very familiar with, but she was very unhappy. But she wanted to take this promotion. This promotion was being offered to her. And I could just tell she wasn't excited about it, but she wanted to take it. And I said, okay, tell me who all is in the mental room while you're making this decision. Who all is in your mind about this decision? And she said, oh, everybody. My dad's there. My third grade teacher's there. My coworker, like everyone's there. I said, okay, let's just breathe and get him out of the room for a minute. If no one else's opinion mattered, what would you do? And without even hesitating, she said, oh, I know what I would do. I would sell my shares and I'd move to Italy and I would start a coffee shop. I have no idea if this woman's ever made a cup of coffee, but what I am saying is that she is incredibly clear in the minute that she removed what other people think. it became really clear to her what she wants to do. So I promise you, at the point that you are the least sure about what you want is when you are the most concerned about what other people think. So if you're stuck in something, if you're stuck in, oh, I don't know what to do next, I guarantee you it's because there's other influence there. And as a writer, the only time I get writer's block is when I am worried about how I'm going to be read. When I've already jumped ahead and I'm worried about how people might perceive what I've written, that's when I can't write. I can only write what I want to say. So just make sure that if you're stuck, you take a little bit of time to clear people out of that mental room. The other thing I'd say is we as people think we can capture and control perceptions. I can get you to like me and I can keep you liking me, right? And so I'll tell this, and I say this with all vulnerability. I used to hate, and I'm using this word exactly how I mean it. I used to hate Angelina Jolie. I was Team Aniston. I didn't think that she handled it all that well. And so I looked at everything she did, this humanitarian work, the adopting the children, the films she made, and I was like, ugh, I hate her. And yet, even though I hated her fiercely, Angelina Jolie kept living her life just fine. And the more that she lived it, despite my hate for her, I started to develop a little bit of respect. And that respect eventually turned into, I kind of like this woman. And now I'm like an Angelina Jolie super fan. I mean, if you look at all the humanitarian work, if you look at the children she adopted, if you look at the films she makes, she's incredible. But what I'm suggesting here is people's perceptions of you are unknowable. My guess is Angelina didn't know how much I hated her, but it wasn't her business anyway. So if we're constantly trying to know those or try to capture those, they can, will, and should change. Over time, what people think about you can, will, and should change. So even if we could capture it, we can't maintain it. So we really have to kind of let go of the stories that people might be writing about you. So now let's move into what are the three components of a successful negotiation, right? We know what holds us back. Now what actually makes a successful negotiation? The first is you have to have a reasonable want. The second is you have to have defined leverage. And the third is you have to find mutual benefit. That's it. If you have these three and you don't keep yourself held back by the previous three, you're going to be good to go. So the reasonable want. It's not a lot asking for the moon if you work for NASA, but where I work, that would be a lot to ask, right? So we have to think about a reasonable want. And in that context really, really matters. Before the pandemic, a lot of people were trying to negotiate, that I worked with, were trying to negotiate flexible work from home scenarios. And for many of the people that were trying to do that, that just wasn't possible. It wasn't within the context of that work. And so employers were like, yeah, I can't offer you that. The context has now changed, and we find a lot of people are now virtual. In fact, 40% of the workforce is virtual right now. And so now there's a different context, and asking for working from home or a flexible schedule is a more reasonable want. Please understand what I'm saying here. If you want something, I don't want to stop you from having that, but if it doesn't fit within the context, it's not trying to negotiate that within this context, it's getting a new context. So you just have to make sure if someone comes to you with a $50,000 salary and you're wanting 100, you're gonna need a different context. You're not gonna be able to negotiate all the way up to that in the context you have. So the realm of possibility, it depends entirely on the realm that you're in. So just take that into consideration, that your context really matters. The second is you need to have defined leverage. And I think what happens here is we allow other people to define our worth. And my students are really guilty of thinking that their bosses are watching their every move and they're just enamored of what they're doing. And they just sit there and they just can't wait to pat them on the back and say, now it's time for a raise. I've watched you. You're incredible. Let's go. That never happens because your boss is hoping somebody else is watching them. They're mired in their own stuff. And so no one's really watching us like we think they are, both good and bad, right? They're not watching us and criticizing us like we think they are, but they're also not watching us and tracking the good work that we do. The most difficult assignment that I give graduate students, these are some of the smartest people I've ever met, and I ask them to update their resume and they melt. They would much rather write a 30-page research paper than update their resume. But I make them do it because I need them to define what it is that they've done. And very few people can remember what they've done over the last year. Oh, I couldn't possibly write that down. But you have to be able to define your worth, because if you don't, others are going to do that. And that's really not something that you want. You do not want someone else defining your worth. The next thing you need is mutual benefit. And I think this is where negotiation gets a bad rap. We have an I win, you lose situation, and that's actually very rarely the case in a good negotiation. And as people who sell houses, hopefully that's something that's very clear to you. You must consider who's at the table. One of the things that I cover in my book is when I was in my doctoral program, we had our daughter. I was home full time with her, working on my doctoral program and commuting at night to teach adjuncted at a neighboring university. And so it was round the clock, and then trying to be this perfect mother and trying to kind of live up to expectations that actually didn't exist. And so I finally came to my husband and I said, I am drowning here and I need help with this, this, and this. And if you do that, I think I can do more of the cooking. And before I could list more things, he stopped me and said, you feeling good and being the best version of you is enough for me, is enough. I just didn't know you were feeling this way. And yet I was thinking if I went into that negotiation, I somehow had to have something that I would offer in return. It is enough that your clients or the people that you work with see you at your best, right? You can ask for things, and the mutual benefit is that they get the best version of you. And so whatever you need, time off or more money or whatever it is, that's still going to benefit them because it makes you a better person and it makes you a better employee and a better realtor or whatever you're trying to be, better mother. So a good negotiation is a win-win, not a win-lose, and then very rarely a lose-lose, because you've got the defined leverage of who it is that you are and the best that you can be. Now, here are 3 areas that I think you can set better terms with negotiation. This is by no means exhaustive, but it's the ones that come up the most. The first is money. And I think when people hear negotiation, that's the first thing they think about. It's honestly the least thing that people wind up needing, but we'll get to that in a minute. Money, time, and relationships. These are where you can use this framework all the time and get more and get better terms for yourself. So the first one is money. And money is a fascinating little piece of paper because it creates more feelings than anything else I can think of on the planet. You have to grapple with your money weirdness. The way this came up for me was I was born in rural Oklahoma, in northeastern Oklahoma, in a tiny town with 1 stoplight. And I had parents who were small business owners, and they had physically labor-intensive jobs. And so at the end of the day, these people were exhausted. And they worked so hard 7 days a week. They're in their 70s and they're still doing this. So in my mind, money only came if you were on the brink of exhaustion. Imagine how difficult that would be for me then to go negotiate something if I'm not feeling on the brink of exhaustion. I haven't earned it yet. And that was a weird thing, a real thing for me to grapple with on my own money weirdness. We all have it. We all have different things that we attach, but I guarantee you, when it's coming to negotiate more money or more salary or commissions or whatever, there's some attachment there that we have with money that we really have to get clear on. So I will say this may not be as applicable for your style of pay and commission, and not being super familiar with how it all works for you all. I do think this is important information to know about negotiating salary that I hope that you can also think about if you, both in commission-based, but also if you just know someone who's going out for a job. This is just, we need to air this out. We need to talk about money as a society. And this is important information to know. The first is one of the reasons that there's a pay gap with women. Now that's a very, very layered problem. One of the problems is that we don't let them talk first. There's always a budget attached if money is going to be spent. So whoever's spending the money has already created that budget. So you need to know what that is first. That needs to come first. You shouldn't be talking first. The second, And again, if this were in a more traditional salary range, do not reveal your previous salary. This is actually the #1 reason and the #1 thing women can do to prevent the gender pay inequity is that we attach, you get paid for the job you're doing, not the job you did. So you should never reveal your current or past salary, and you should always be pressing them to know their budget before you make any decision on anything. What do you have budgeted for this role? And then the final thing is to always counter. My God, I can't imagine a group that knows this more than anyone, is to always counter, and that there's an expectation that when we have a budget, there's a range, and people are always going to come in at the lower end of the range. We know this in theory, but we never actually execute it in practice. So it's important to know if someone is being asked what their previous salary is, I wouldn't say it's a red flag, because I don't think a lot of people realize how dangerous that question is. But one of the things that I've learned in this work is just because you're asked a question doesn't mean that you have to respond. And how powerful is that to know that that's the truth? The second way that I think people can negotiate their time, to use negotiation, is in time. And I think it's to seek to be replaceable. And I think we all have this idea that we're so much more powerful than we really are, and that everything rests on us. And I think about my children, how I want to be irreplaceable to them. I am the only person that, when they were young, could give them the bottle and swaddle. No one could do it like me. But then if I needed a night out with my husband, I was going to have to be replaceable, at least to the sitter. And you kind of have to be able to be replaceable. But in work, we tend to build ourselves up as, if I take a break, everything's going to fall apart. I can't be replaced. And that actually prevents you from moving up. When I first took my job at OU, and I run an entire graduate program, one of the biggest compliments you could give me is that if anything happened to you, Meg, the program would go away. And that gave me such a sense of ego and purpose. Like, if I got hit by a bus, there would be graduate students just homeless and naked on the street if it weren't for uneducated. That's how powerful I was. But then I started to realize, man, if I can't be replaced, I can never move up, because all these graduate students would be naked and uneducated on the streets. But that's where you have to seek to be replaceable, or you're never going to move up. So here's a couple of ways you can seek to be replaceable. You need to make 2 lists: the things that you want to do and the things that are holding you back from doing those. And you've got to delegate that second list, that thing that's holding you back. And I promise you, delegation brings up some real weirdness, right? Nobody can do it like I do. Nobody can swaddle my kids like I do. But you got to get over that weirdness, because your ego and your identity are wrapped up in the way that you do things, but it isn't about the way you do it. It's that you need that time back. And then you have to start strategically opting in and out of meetings. I had this client who is a CEO at a small firm, and she said, I can't just stop showing up to these meetings, even though I go to about 10 hours of meetings I shouldn't be at. I said, what happens if you don't go to this one meeting? And she says, well, then my staff won't know I support them. I've delegated, I've gotten over the weirdness, but I still need to show up for the meeting so that they know that I support them. I said, is there any other way that you support them that they know? She's like, oh, I have office hours. I get them Starbucks. I always get them presents for Christmas. I give them money for performance development. I'm like, I think they get it. Like, I think they know you support them. I think you can sit out an hour meeting, right? But there's something about us being worried, what it communicates if we're not there. Also think about, what does it communicate if you are there? Does it communicate that you're just going to be at every meeting from the end of time? So again, delegate, get over your weirdness about delegating, and then strategically opt in and opt out. Remember, if you are the end all, the end is all you will ever be. And that's a sad thought. Like, this is it. This is your stopping point. You don't want that. You want to grow bigger and better and stronger and faster. And until you figure out how to be replaceable, that's all you'll be. The final thing that I'll talk about is relationships. And this is one of the most crucial parts of negotiation, and how we conflate negotiation with conflict. A lot of people that come to me that want to negotiate haven't, because they're conflict averse. I think we're all a little conflict averse. But one of the things that you could do to better negotiate is to acknowledge how much you assume. and acknowledge how much you make up stories about the way that people might perceive you or think about you. You know, I have a lot of people that will say, well, if I asked for this, he would go berserk. I'm like, Woody, do we know that? Is that for sure? Are we resting on that story? So a couple of years into my job at OU, this kept coming up. So I created this metric that I give to students. And so I always pass it on at keynotes because I find it very helpful, which was at the end of the night, I would be laying down and I would be sorting through everything that happened. Did I make that person mad? Are they, you know, did I come off as stupid? Like what happened? You know, and I'm writing this whole story and I'm freaking out. And then I realized, okay, I just got to organize this like I organize my closet. And I don't know if any of you are fans of KonMari or if you do recycling or however you do it, but I think we all know the toss, donate, keep, right? We toss what just doesn't fit anymore or is just too gross to pass on to someone else. We donate the stuff that is still workable but is not for us, and then we keep what's valuable. When we think about our mental closet, we want to toss what we fear. We want to keep what you hear. Donate what you hear and keep what is clear. So toss what you fear, donate what you hear, keep what is clear. So what you fear are predictions and assumptions. And my first year of teaching at the college level, I had this student that hated me. Now, he didn't tell me he hated me, but I knew he hated me because you just know when someone hates you. And I knew this guy after class would go home and throw darts at my picture. Like this guy was out to get me. And not only did he hate me, but he hated the classes I taught. He thought I was a bad teacher, and he thought even being in the program was a waste of his time. At graduation, he came up to me in his cap and gown, he handed me an envelope, and he walked away. And I waited until I got to the car because I thought, okay, this is either a restraining order or a death threat, so I'm gonna wait till I get in the car with the doors locked. And I opened it up, and it was a 2-page handwritten letter about how influential and inspirational I had been to him. I not only got it wrong, I got it way wrong. And I'm not saying that everyone that loves me actually hates me, everyone that I think hates me actually loves me, but I am saying that was clearly my own projection of my own insecurities about teaching. And I wrote an entire story about this guy that wasn't even kind of true. These are not useful thoughts. Get rid of them. When it comes to donating what you hear, we're talking about gossip and rumors. Now, gossip and rumors have their place. They bond us. They are a way that we get information. Where they hurt us, though, is when we start to take them and keep them in our closet. Probably 3 years ago, I had this woman come into my office, shut the door. This is on campus, shut the door. And she sat down and she said, I want you to know that I like you. That's a good way to start a sentence. I like you, but I want you to know that Janet thinks that you're full of yourself. I didn't know who Janet was, but now I was on a mission to make sure Janet knew I was not full of myself. And I thought about every single time that I'd been in a room where Janet might have been. Did I come across that way? I'm the least full of myself person. I'm actually, like all of us, struggle with insecurity, yet this woman had this wrong idea. What I should have done and what I do now is when somebody comes into my office to tell me feedback like that, whether it's this woman telling me about Janet or a student telling me what other students think, I donate it back. I say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that Janet thinks that. Why don't you have Janet come talk to me about it? Because what that does is it either makes that person go away and not say anything to Janet. It makes that person go to Janet and say, I talked to Meg and she wants to talk to you. And Janet goes, I was just blowing smoke, Meg's fine. Or Janet goes, yeah, I'll tell Meg exactly what I think about her. And then we're into the only pile I'm willing to keep, which is what is clear, which is that direct feedback and clear comments that come to you in a constructive and respectful way. And I'm not saying that you can't keep an eye on what people might be perceiving, that you're coming across as rude or that you're kind of shutting people down, but we really have to build structures around ourselves where we are negotiating for ourselves that we are only going to listen to the stuff that is direct feedback and clear comments. And that's all that I'm willing to keep. So reframe that possible perception. When people say, I'm so worried if I negotiate, they're going to think I'm greedy. What if they think you're really self-possessed? What if they think you're really strong? What if they think you're really bold, right? There's a lot of things that they might think, and we tend to go super negative with what people might think of us. What might they positively think about you? I want to end with this, and then I'd love to open it up for questions. There is value in the ask. I had a student that had her eye on this dream job, and I'm very leery when people use the word dream job. They don't exist, and it's a lot of pressure. Had her eye on this dream job, came back to school so she could get this dream job, and then eventually got offered this dream job. And she came to my office and she had the official letter and she handed it to me and she's like, I don't feel great about this. What do you think? And it was an absurdly low salary. And we identified her pain point, which was, I feel resentful, right? I don't want to start working for these people. I've gone back to school to take this job. I feel this is unreasonable. Based on the market, it was unreasonable. So we sat there and we crafted a negotiation response. And they came back and said, sorry, it's this or nothing. And so people always say, are negotiations always successful? And I say, no, but there's value in the ask, because when this woman was told, you have to accept this low offer or don't take the job, she didn't take the job. And it surprised me that she didn't, because she had long wanted to be in this role, but she said, I didn't take the salary, I didn't take this job, because the minute I emailed them, the minute I asked for what I needed, I knew I couldn't accept less. There is value in the ask because your top demand becomes your bottom line. And the second that you ask for help from your spouse, you know you have to have it. It's non-negotiable at that point. The second that you ask for a salary that sounds reasonable and feels reasonable and aligns with your worth and your value, you can't accept less. So if you are worried that you ask for something or you negotiate for something and the answer might be no, that's okay, because it at least leveled you up to know what you need. And that's really, really important to get. So for everyone out there, please know your worth and ask for more. Thank you so much for listening. I want to open it up to anyone that may have questions beyond that. And I'll stop my share.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much.
You're
if
welcome.
anybody has a question for Meg, just unmute your mic.
I see I was Team Aniston in the chat. That's really funny.
Yeah.
All right, tell me what your questions are. I'm a professor, so I'm used to sitting here while people think about their question, if you have any.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important question that you can ask when you find yourself in a negotiating situation, when you're negotiating for yourself personally?
I like to say, what is at stake? A lot of people like to phrase questions with why. Why do I feel this way? Why is this hard for me? I think any question that starts with why is incredibly self-critical, because you may not know the answer, and even if you knew the answer, it wouldn't necessarily change your behaviors. So if you say, what is at stake? How am I showing up to this? What might I do differently? I think that starts to let you become curious. And so I would offer, and for those that were on the call yesterday, what is at stake is a really important question, because most people will say, oh, my salary is at stake. I'm like, is it though? And then they'll say, okay, my self-worth is at stake. If I don't get this, then I don't feel worthy, right? And so it becomes a much deeper, much more important question that I think is relevant to ask, is really, if you got whatever you wanted, it's sometimes solving a different problem. Sometimes people ask for more money when what they really needed was more recognition or appreciation. Good question.
Anybody else? We've got her on the horn.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kimmy.
So Meg, in our jobs, obviously, we're doing a lot of negotiating for other people,
Yeah.
sellers and buyers. And so what I would like to know is, what is the most crucial thing we need to find out? If why is not the right question, then what do we need to find out other than what's most important? In other words, that everybody ends up happy with what they had to pay and what they had to sell it for.
I love this question, Kimmy. Can you give me in a specific, not having been, I've only been on the side of buying and selling houses. I've not actually done what you do. Do you have a particular example?
Well, just the sense that, like, sometimes when you represent a seller, they are so stuck on getting a certain price that they won't budge, and you're trying to find out what is how to get them off the ledge of that, right? And then on the buying side, it's the same. They won't come up another $500 when even you try to prove to them that it's going to be $2 more in their payment every month. So you just have to find out, and I don't know what the magic words are for each side to get them off the
this is a little, this may not be where you'd want me to go with this, but there's part of me that wonders if your industry has to bend too much to the clients, right? Is it, if we already have the solution in mind before we've understood what's at the root of the seller, right? So I would imagine with houses, people think their house is always worth more than it is. I've been there, and they think the house that they're buying is a piece of crap, but so they should get, you know, tons off. And I think that then your mentality comes around what they think and what they need. And I'm curious, does it bring up some feeling for you, Kimmy, when you're in the middle of that? Does it make you feel a certain way?
Well, it makes me feel like they don't believe my expertise.
Good. Okay, good. So I think that, and I'm not quite answering your question, but I think that that's really important that you label that I don't feel believed, I don't feel trusted. And so it might be an opportunity, not when you're in the negotiation, but before you book the client, right? Before you take on that client, to say, these are the things that I need from you for us to work together. I need you to trust me. Trust is really important to me. But that also means you're willing to let go of a client that may not agree to that, right? And so that does maybe help you in that moment. But I always say I can't coach people that aren't in the room. So I don't know what those sellers or buyers might be like, but I would imagine that happens almost every time. And I always think that might be because when I do contracting and coaching work, most of that work is on that front end of you understanding how this framework works. And you understanding I'm leading and I'm on your side, and there's going to come a point where you're going to stop believing me, and that's going to be a problem, and I need you to voice that. So that would be my suggestion in that, is just that entering and contracting phase being even more robust than it already is.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Anyone else?
I've got a question, Mark
Great.
Carr. Thanks, Meg, for your presentation. Absolutely wonderful. You brought up kind of the gender role within this. Like you said, you deal with a lot of women. Now, 64% of realtors are women. And so as a male in here, I'm in the minority, are there biases between negotiating, when you're negotiating between male and female, when you're in the minority role within this community?
So is there a bias because you're male?
I'll give you an example that a lot of your illustrations you used was from the perspective of motherhood. And that's one of the things that I see in this, is that we use motherhood as an example in doing that, because the majority are women. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it comes in and goes, okay, what is there a particular language bias in this, or there's a way to be better at presenting negotiations when, you haven't been a mom?
Yes, although I will say, Mark, and I appreciate that. One, there's a need for, I think this is applicable to men and women. I think there's also a need for men to know that there is a barrier when it comes to the perceptions of women versus the perceptions of men. And even if you're in the minority, there are still some advantages to you being male, even in a minority industry. And we think about teaching or the medical field, these professions that are dominated by women, still the men are at the top in the industry. And so that's why this particular talk is aimed at women. But I will say, because I'm not quite sure if your question is about what I presented or about what you could use. That's just my lived experience. But I do just as many negotiations with male male students, they're just not ever worried about how they're going to be perceived. So in meetings, women often have to make sure that they're not seen as rude or displeasing. And so that kind of stops a lot of people from actually being a little bit more a lot of women from being more forthright with their negotiations. Did I kind of get what you were getting at, Mark?
Yeah, that's a good point there. A good perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
I want to remind everybody, I put it in the chat, but Meg donated several of her books, her recent book, Everything is Negotiable, to OKCMAR for us to give away, because we're realtors and we love a good giveaway. If you want to put your name in the drawing for that, make sure that you send an email to events@okcmar.org, and they will write your name on a little slip of paper and put them in the bingo hopper down at the office and spin it up and pull out the winner or winners. Not really, it probably won't be that involved, but don't forget, email that you would like to be entered into the drawing for one of Meg's books to events@okcmar.org. Anybody else have anything for Meg? Personally, I want to just say thank you so much. Great information, really timely. We can use it in different aspects of our lives here, and we really appreciate your time. So
thank you all for having me and for being such a good audience, and for those that asked questions. They were great questions, and I'll keep thinking about them. So thank you all.
Thank you, Maggie.
Only my mother and husband call me that, so it's funny to hear someone say Maggie, but I love it.
Well, you know, did you see the post from our friend Kat?
I did. She's the only other person.
That's how I know Maggie.
Okay, OKCMAR members, thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday. Go sell some houses and be kind to each other.